On November 14th, 1862, in Staten Island, New York, William and his wife welcomed their ninth and youngest child, George Washington Vanderbilt, into the world. George was the grandson of Cornelius Vanderbilt, the shipping and railroad tycoon. At the mere age of 16, Farmer Cornelius, with only $100, bought his first boat to transport freight. Because Cornelius had an intense interest in steam engines, he meticulously studied them. Later, he even designed his own steamboats and trains, which he began to use for his business. By the Civil War, many of Cornelius's boats were commissioned, including the Old Star of the West, which transported Union troops and supplies to South Carolina's own Fort Sumter. By 1871, Cornelius had Grand Central Depot constructed in New York. Eventually, Cornelius and his family would become one of the richest families in the world, second only to the Rockefellers. In fact, at one time, the Vanderbilts would have more money than the U.S. Treasury. However, regardless of Cornelius's wealth, he remained illiterate. It is also written that he paid his workers poorly, had a very bad temper, and a foul mouth. Cornelius also had a bad reputation as a womanizer, whose philandering even resulted in his own wife contracting syphilis. Cornelius also ignored his daughters, insulted his sons, and even had family members committed to lunatic asylums. During his life, Cornelius constantly belittled George's father, Billy, by calling him a blockhead, lazy, and unambitious. Cornelius also did not approve of George's mother as a wife. While originally not considered able to oversee the railroads, George's father, Billy, was placed as a manager over the family farm in Staten Island. However, Billy would go on to double the family's fortune by expanding their railroad network. Upon Cornelius's passing, he did leave $100 million to his son Billy and $2 million to his grandson George. While during life Cornelius and Billy's relationship was strained, Billy and his youngest son George were very close. Interestingly, when Billy's youngest son George turned 21, he was given $1 million as a gift. George was known to be introverted and quite shy. As a son of such a wealthy family, George's lifestyle included collecting over 20,000 books in his private library, studying philosophy, collecting art, and traveling. In fact, George loved traveling so much that he learned many languages. As an adult, George also managed the family farm on Staten Island. In 1885, when Billy unfortunately passed away from a stroke, George inherited $5 million and was given a $5 million trust fund. At 26 years old, George Washington Vanderbilt discovered the resort town of Asheville, North Carolina. He was on a trip with his mother, and he fell in love with the scenic beauty of the Blue Ridge Mountains. As a result, George decided to build his own country home in Asheville so he could enjoy the beautiful mountains and hunting. However, I have also heard that the reason he chose Asheville, besides its beauty, was due to his mother's health condition. His mother had contracted malaria a few years back, but continued to have lingering symptoms, and it was believed that the mountain air would be good for her. In fact, George loved his mother so much that eventually, as an adult, he would have another home built near his mother and his childhood home in New York. Regardless of the reasons, by 1888, George decided it was time to establish his own residence. So, in order to keep the price of land reasonable, George hired a lawyer to buy 300 pieces of land for him. When put together, these properties accounted for 125,000 acres of woodland, including Mount Pisgah. Because much of this land had already been destroyed by logging, George hired men to replant trees. This would become the first forest conservation project in the nation and ultimately led to the founding of the U.S. Forest Service. As a result of planting millions of trees, George had a forestry school established on his property. In addition, George would hire between 500 to 1,000 people to work 6 days a week for a little over 6 years to make his dream a reality. By the completion of the estate, George's home, the Builtmore, would be the largest privately owned home in America. George's 179,000 square foot home includes 35 bedrooms, 43 bathrooms, 16 chimneys with 65 fireplaces, a billiard room, smoking room, bachelor room, music room, bowling alley, a grand cantilever staircase, a later Halloween-themed basement, and a swimming pool, which at the time had lights and was heated. The home also boasts 2 elevators, which were among the first in the nation. Many people love the Glass Conservatory, which has a tropical atmosphere and is filled with exotic plants. My favorite room is the library, which contains 10,000 books, many of which are first editions. However, my favorite part of visiting the library was seeing Napoleon Bonaparte's personal chess set. The Biltmore also has a room that is 90 feet in length and lined with tapestries. Another breathtaking room in the Biltmore is the banquet hall, which has a triple fireplace, 70-foot vaulted ceilings, a 40-foot table, and a piped organ. During the Christmas holidays, this room is a must-see as it contains a 35-foot Fraser fir. The exterior of the Biltmore is covered in Indiana limestone, which was brought to the property by a private train car. While on one of the Biltmore's many balconies, you can clearly see Mount Mitchell, which is the tallest mountain east of the Mississippi. Even the roof at the Biltmore is beautiful. It is a slate roof trimmed with copper. This was done to reduce moss growth. In addition, the roof is embossed with details that at one time were covered in 24-karat gold. While George's grandfather Cornelius may have been harsh with his employees, George was known to be fair and generous. After the Biltmore's completion in 1895, George employed 35 servants within the house and many more with outdoor duties. His outdoor servants maintained his beautiful gardens and worked in his horse stables. Then, in 1897, George hired more people to work in his dairy. By 1898, George finally married. He was married in Paris and honeymooned in Italy. By 1900, George and his wife Edith welcomed their only child, a daughter they named Cornelia. In 1912, while continuing to travel, George and Edith became so homesick they decided to leave earlier and boarded the Olympic instead of taking their planned voyage on the Titanic. In 1914, George unexpectedly passed away after an emergency appendectomy in Washington, D.C. In death, George Washington Vanderbilt's legacy wasn't the Biltmore. It was his dedication in improving the hundreds of lives of the people who worked for him in his home, dairy, farm, railroad station, church, and schools. In fact, the Biltmore estate functioned as a self-supporting village, providing jobs and regular wages for people who desperately needed it. In the year of George's passing, his wife Edith sold 86,000 acres to the U.S. government. This public land was used to create Pisgah National Forest, which includes the famed Cold Mountain. On April 29th of 1924, Cornelia married British aristocrat John Cecil. While married, they lived at the Biltmore estate and had 2 sons. In 1930, Cornelia and her husband, John Cecil, opened the Biltmore estate to the public. This decision was made to increase tourism to the Asheville area during the Depression and generate income to preserve the estate. Unfortunately, in 1934, Cornelia and John divorced. As a result, Cornelia moved to Europe to work in art. While in Europe, Cornelia did remarry, first to the 9th Duke of Devonshire. However, upon the Duke's death, Cornelia again remarried, this time to restaurant waiter Bill Goodser. Sadly, Cornelia never again visited her former home at the Biltmore. Eventually, Cornelia's eldest son, George Henry Vanderbilt Cecil, inherited the Biltmore estate. He and his wife, Nancy Owens, who he married in 1955, occupied some of the rooms in the Biltmore until 1956. By this point, the Biltmore house ceased to be a family residence and was operated as a historic house museum. However, while George no longer lived in the Biltmore, he did remain owner and chairman of the Biltmore Farms. Astonishingly, as of 1973, none of the Vanderbilt descendants have even $1 million. Today, as a museum, the Biltmore houses over 3,500 historical artifacts that tells the history of the house and the people of the past. 2 of the interesting artifacts include a replica of a brooch that was given to Edith by George, and a photo of a dairy worker who lived on the property and had a pet deer named Jim. Besides just walking through the Biltmore house, the estate offers a variety of tours. You can also explore the estate's 8,000 acres, which includes a garden, winery, and the Antler Hill Village. The estate also offers an afternoon tea and various dining and shops. In addition, some of the fun things that the estate offers includes classes, croquet, a spa, geocaching, bike rentals, hiking, wine tasting, horse and carriage rides, fly fishing, a Land Rover excursion, shooting clays, yoga and meditation, bird watching, and falconry. While here, you can also experience seasonal events and see different craft demonstrations like broom making, wood carving, and basket weaving. During our visit, my children's favorite was visiting the creamery for ice cream and seeing the sheepdog demonstration at the small farm. If you plan on staying at the Biltmore for more than a day, the property does have cottages, an inn, and a hotel. However, for the most luxurious experience, most people stay at the historic and romantic Omni Grove Inn, which is only 13 minutes away. While not advertised, some people do come to the Biltmore with the expectation of experiencing paranormal activity. Some reports include the sounds of footsteps and cold spots on the staircase, whispers, screams, and the appearance of a drunk flapper in the Halloween room, a headless cat in the gardens, the dripping and splashing of water, as well as the appearance of a lady in black in the pool area. People have also claimed to hear music and even see George and Edith in the library. In addition, people also think the property is haunted. This is because in 1922, the Vanderbilt guard, Walter, killed 2 of 5 intruders. In 1932, a man by the name of Philip, who frequented the inn, was later pushed from a balcony in New York, and it is said that today in the inn you can still smell his cigars. During that same year, a lady by the name of Linda also passed. She was said to be beautiful with auburn hair, who often wore a pink bathrobe and perfume. She was a prostitute and was killed on the Builtmore property in either the inn or the forestry school. However, in my opinion, the scariest part of visiting the Builtmore is its price. I myself have visited more than a handful of times and have always found it enchanting. I sincerely hope that you one day get the opportunity to experience the charm of the Builtmore. If you enjoyed this video, please like it, and as always, thanks for watching.